My name is Jane Detton, and I'm the manager and curator of the Marland Grand Home in Ponca City. The Marland Grand Home was the first mansion of E.W. and Mary Virginia Marland. It was finished in 1916, and the Marlands moved in December, just before Christmas. We're going to take a tour of the Marland Grand Home and show you what it has to offer. You can see behind me in the entryway of the Marland Grand Home is a very large hanging stairway. A number of brides have had their photos made here. The first room in the Marland Grand Home we're going to explore is the library, where we're standing now. And if you'll come with me and take a look at this photo on the wall, it shows an aerial view of the Marland Grand Home and its grounds in the early 1920s. So it gives you a much better perspective of the home and where it sat in those days. Across the street from the home, which the home is here on the left in the middle, which looks very small in the photo, for a 22-room, 16,500 square foot home. But above it to the north, across the street, was a 9-hole golf course that Marland built for the citizens of the community and his employees to play free of charge. He wanted them to have healthy pursuits, just like the fox hunting and the polo, that we'll talk about soon. And then you'll look down in the middle of the photo, and over to the right, you'll see the formal gardens. The formal gardens were designed by E.W. Marland and Henry Hadashida, his Japanese gardener. E.W. Marland and Mary Virginia traveled in Europe quite often, and while there, in England and France especially, Mr. Marland would pay attention to the formal gardens. You see, Marland loved gardens and the beauty that they brought and wanted Ponca City to be full of gardens, and that was one of his philanthropic endeavors. He provided space and plantings for all the people to enjoy. There are probably about 6 square blocks of formal gardens here at the Marland Grand Home. And we'll talk more about that in Henry Hadashida later. And then down to the south, there was a large vegetable garden which also held tree seedlings and bush seedlings before they were transplanted elsewhere. E.W. Marland came from Pennsylvania, where he and his wife Mary Virginia first lived. They were married in 1903, and in 1908 came to Ponca City to look for oil. Back east, Marland had already made and lost one oil fortune in the hills of West Virginia and Pennsylvania. You see, Marland was trained as an attorney, but he didn't want to much practice law. And as an attorney, he had been assigned to coal and oil leases, where he also acquired some of his own leases and made himself a millionaire by age 33. Unfortunately, he lost that fortune in the bank panic of 1907. He knew that Oklahoma was a brand new state and not much oil had been found, a little bit over by Tulsa, but there was great potential here. He had a cousin at Fort Sill and decided to meet up with him, Mr. Kinney, and explore some of northern Oklahoma. So Mr. Kinney and Marland came out to the hills of Ponca City and met the Millers of the 101 Ranch, which was just south of Ponca City. They covered the territory, and indeed, Marland felt that based on his knowledge of geology, which he had studied on the side, that there probably was oil underneath these hills. Now, oil had been discovered over by Tulsa, but not here in Indian Territory. So, a year or so later, Marland came back, moved to Ponca City, lived at the Arcade Hotel with his first wife, Mary Virginia, and started to explore. Between 1908 and 1911, he drilled 8 dry holes, which did produce some natural gas. And on that 9th hole, the Willie Christopher War well, number 9, he hit a big gusher. But you'll find out more about his oil exploration and life later. Right now, we're looking at this painting of a fox hunt in just east of Ponca City, actually. You see, Marland was British. His ancestry was British. His father had immigrated over from England. His grandfather was a schoolmaster back in England, and education was always valued highly in the Marland family, as was community service. Marland took care of his employees here while he ran the Marland Oil Company and wanted them to not only have good housing, but also extra healthy pursuits to take part of in their free time. And you know, we had just looked at the golf course that he built for anyone to play, citizens and employees alike, for free. Well, Marland also provided fox hunting and polo for his employees and the citizens of the town. And this painting shows one of the fox hunting parties. You'll see here, we have Lyde, his adopted niece here to my right, and then Mr. Marland. And then we have George Marland here, Lyde's brother, the adopted nephew, and also Major Donald Henderson, who was the master of the foxhounds. So a master of the foxhounds is like a coach or someone who was there to instruct. The other redcoat people were also helping with the hunt. The whip would take care of the dogs, which is probably the man down here with the foxhound, and then others helped keep the party intact. You see, there's a strict protocol to fox hunting, and as far as the British say, no one is to get out of line. It was known that many times the Oklahoma riders, some of them being the cowboy type, would override the hounds, which meant the horses, the mounts, would get in front of the hounds, and that was a real no-no. Everything needed to stay in order, so the hounds were always to precede the pack of horses. Marland particularly loved fox hunting. It was his favorite sport. But George, on the other hand, his favorite was polo, and we'll learn more about that when we go upstairs. I want to tell you a little bit more about E.W. and Mary Virginia Marland. You know, we mentioned that they were both from Pennsylvania and then came out to Oklahoma looking for oil, which Marland had already found that one fortune back east and was ready to try again since he had lost it. We have a really nice portrait of E.W. Marland hanging above our fireplace. This is middle-aged, probably in his 40s, in order to honor him. Marland's fireplaces in this home have tile from Mexico and were very well constructed for 1916. Most of the light fixtures in the Marland Grand home are original, and this one hanging in the formal living room is one of the most beautiful. Although it's mostly brass, it appears to be gold leaf. There are corded tassels hanging and other intricate details that make it quite beautiful. Also in the formal living room of the Marland Grand home is a very elegant fireplace. The marble came from Mexico under the reign of Maximilian. You can see here is a very early day photo of the Marland family. It shows the niece and nephew, Lydia and George, at a very young age before they came to Ponca City. During this time, they were probably visiting with their parents from Pennsylvania. Also, Mrs. Marland's mother is in the picture seated or standing behind Mr. Marland. Another one of those first we were talking about, hidden here underneath this table and on the baseboard, is a round brass cover plate for the central vacuum system. The Marlands had this central vacuum system all through their 4-story home. In order to be able to understand the Marland family and some friends better, we have a nice collection of photos on top of our piano. Several of them here include Lydia and George, E.W. and Mary Virginia Marland, and some other friends. We've moved on into the formal dining room now of the Marland Grand home, and there are many beautiful things here. The table, not original to the Marlands, did belong to the Paris family. They were a family that lived here from 1940 to 1967 when the city purchased the property. And the Parises had the large furniture store downtown and collected antiques. So some of the Paris items are older than some of the Marland items and very beautiful in and of themselves. In the china cabinet in the corner is a set of black and white dishes. You'll see more of those dishes in the butler's pantry too. And they were hand-painted at the request of Mary Virginia Marland for her husband, E.W. Marland, for his birthday. They show scenes of the home itself. In the formal dining room, we have other lovely pieces of furnishings here as well that also belong to the Paris family. Cherry buffet all the way from New Orleans with the marble top that would be either late 1800s or early 1900s. And some beautiful silver that the Paris family owned, very appropriate to a formal dining room. And then there's the buffet that went along with the formal dining room table. Also on the wall, which is very much of note, are the hand-painted murals done by an artist named Lazarski for the Marlands. And they're still in very good shape today. We've moved on into the butler's pantry, which adjoins the formal dining room. There's an original bank of cabinets here that were the Marlands in 1916. The cabinets are topped with Monel, a stainless steel product which was only used on submarines during the time. Mr. Marland had to go to the U.S. government and get special permission to allow him to use this in his home. You'll see in the above cabinets more of those black and white dishes with the scene of the Marland Grand Home that Mrs. Marland had painted for her husband. We're now in the kitchen of the Marland Grand Home, which was actually remodeled in 2007 to look like a period kitchen. Kitchens, as in most of our homes today, have been remodeled several times, and so this one in particular had gotten very far away from its original. We do have a few original elements. The stove and the icebox are of the period but didn't belong to the Marlands, but they definitely give a feel of the times. But in the window, we do see an original exhaust fan, which was quite large for the space, and I'm sure did the job very well. This is the back side of the home, which shows the back entrance where deliveries would have been made, milk would have been delivered, ice would have been delivered. And in that butler's pantry we just came from, there was an ice door where ice could be placed from the back porch through the wall and into the home without having to enter the back door. Also in the kitchen is an original work table of the Marlands shown here. All of our Marland pieces have black ribbons with gold medallions somewhere placed on them so that our guests will be able to see which pieces are designated as Marlands. Here on the wall we have two doilies that were actually crocheted by Mary Virginia Marland. We want to let our visitors know that the first home of the Marland Grand Home can be rented for special events. The kitchen is caterer friendly, although it looks like an old kitchen. It actually, as we said, was remodeled in 2007. In the kitchen, available to assist anyone that rents would be a dishwasher, a new sink, a modern refrigerator, a warming drawer, a microwave, and then in the butler's pantry we have a wine cooler and an ice machine. So even though we look old in this room, we're not. If you'll follow me out of the kitchen and into the back stairway, I want to show you the stairway that our servants would have used. Here in the back stairway we have an original period phone on the little shelf here, and the Marland Oil office phone number was actually 600. We found that in an old phone book in 1927. And then here to my right was the stairway that the servants used. You know, it was customary in the time for maids and butlers and other housekeeping staff, laundry maids, gardeners, to use a back stairway so that the public would not see them. More of that back hallway and back stairs where the staff would come and go is also a small room which we now use for our office. We know during the parish years of the 40s and beyond, this room was used as a breakfast room. During Marland's time, it very well could have been the head housekeeper's quarters. Here to our left are several panels and collages. One represents Henry Hadashida and his work at the Marland Grand Home. He's the Japanese gardener who led the team of 30 gardeners. Also, we have a large collage of Solomon Layton, who was the architect of the Marland Grand Home and was quite well known for his time. Solomon Layton, in addition, designed the Oklahoma State Capitol building. Two, we have an aerial view of Ponca City in 1930. 1930 aerial view of Ponca City would have been very much like a 1920 aerial view of Ponca City, which was the era of this home. And people can come in and find their homes and streets that they live on even today. It also shows Marland Oil from above, the tank farms, and where some of the wells were, and the layout of the whole company. At the end of the hall, in Marland's time, you would have exited a door and gone into the attached garage. This home has many firsts for 1916, of which only one would have been the attached garage. The garage held 3 cars and was entirely enclosed as a portion of the house, and that was unheard of for that time period. There was also a large carriage house further beyond to the west of the home that could hold 3 more vehicles. At the end of the hall on the left is our current day bathroom, and in Marland's time, It was just a resting place, a powder room of sorts, because it wasn't a proper thing to have a restroom on the first floor in 1916. Above on the ceiling of our gallery hallway are 3 light fixtures which originally hung on the front porch. These light fixtures are an Art Deco style and are quite beautiful. In order to preserve them and save them from damage, they were moved inside several years ago. We've made our way upstairs now, and at our second floor landing we have an exhibit featuring fox hunting, the Barrel hunting camp, and polo. Here you see Mr. Marland in his favorite English hunting tweeds, which he wore often when he went out on fox hunts in the winter. Fox hunting took place from October to March, followed by the polo season from March to October. Marland funded a hunting camp south of Ponca City along the Arkansas River on land owned by the Miller brothers. The Miller brothers' 101 Wild West show would bring in large circus tents and set up for Marland and his oilmen friends to stay the weekend. Here you see original furnishings of E.W. Marland in the fold-up chairs. This hunting camp was frequented by the oilmen of the day and was a popular outing where the folks would gather to fox hunt, sometimes practice polo, of course deer hunt, fish, and just have general camaraderie. Here you see a small exhibit on polo. George Marland, the nephew of Mary Virginia Marland, was adopted by the Marlands in 1916 along with his sister Lydia. George became an avid polo player and was quite a good athlete. In fact, pretty much everyone in town either attended polo matches, boarded polo ponies, or played polo themselves in the early 1920s. On the east side of the second floor landing, visitors will find what we now call the matriarchal room. It displays Native American women's and children's items, which you'll hear about later. Originally, this was Mary Virginia Marland's bedroom suite and had an attached bathroom, which we'll see next. Adjoining Mary Virginia Marland's bedroom was her bath. It was quite formal and fancy for the day. Here you see the original tub and the subway tile that made up the space. Leaving Mary Virginia Marland's bathroom, we come into what used to be an enclosed sun porch. It's been built in now, or was built in now by the Paris family later on in the 40s. In honor of E.W. Marland and his company, Marland Oil, we've set this area up as a makeshift office representing him. On the wall, you'll see an original Marland Oil sign that most likely hung at one of the Marland Oil gas stations in town. You may recognize the more current day Conoco gas sign, although I believe it's actually an oil shape now. But when J.P. Morgan Jr., through the hostile takeover, took over Marland Oil, he combined it with another small company that he had named Continental Oil Company out of Denver, Colorado. And J.P. Morgan certainly wouldn't have wanted the Marland name on his company, and so he changed the name at the time to Continental, which later was coined as Conoco as a nickname. It's an interesting story. The triangle actually came from the original YMCA, the organization in the 19-teens. Marland liked the symbol so much that he asked the YMCA if he could use it for his new oil company in 1916, and they gave him permission. Adjoining the sun porch that we have set up in honor of E.W. Marland and Marland Oil, we come into what we called the guest bedroom. This was an extra bedroom in the early 1920s. The closet, however, does hold an interesting item. Mary Virginia Marland had been sick for a number of years, and to aid in her comfort, E.W. Marland had a Frigidaire air conditioner installed in the closet, one of the first of its day. In fact, the motor was patented in 1919. This air conditioning unit was as large as a refrigerator, and it blew air into the matriarchal room, the original bedroom of Mary Virginia Marland that we just saw. This bedroom, even though we have it set up in honor of Mary Virginia Marland, was most likely the guest bedroom, as I mentioned, in the 1920s, where visitors would stay, and probably George when he came home from college. George and Lydia were teenagers when they came to live with the Marlands, and George, being 18, immediately went off to school in New Jersey and then to Yale University. In the corner, you'll see a medical exhibit of early day medical equipment in a doctor's bag from a doctor here in Ponca City. These medical supplies were not specifically used for Mary Virginia Marland, although they are of the era and belong to the doctor here in Ponca City. Mary Virginia did travel to Kansas City quite frequently for about 5 years and was treated by an internist up there named Dr. Sophian. Marland even built Mary Virginia a second mansion in Kansas City for her stays while she was up there. We've moved on down the second floor landing now to Lydia Marland's bedroom. Remember, Lydia was the adopted niece of Mary Virginia and came to live with the Marlands when she was 16. This was her bedroom. In Lydia Marland's bedroom, the Marlands had special murals painted on the wall, which represent teenage girls playing various sports, from walking to golf, to tennis, to basketball, beach ball, riding horses, and the like. We know this made Lydia feel really special when she came to live here. The Marland Grand home has a display of early day wicker furniture in Lydia's bedroom, which was not used by Lydia or George, of course. We wanted to feature these pieces because they're quite nice and they're a good example of a very popular furniture item of the late 1800s and early 1900s. Wicker was used extensively, mainly for more casual furnishings. Between Lydia's bedroom and the guest bedroom we saw previously sits a bathroom that was able to be utilized by both. This bathroom is now closed off and used for storage. On the west side of the second floor landing, folks will see a cedar closet. This space was utilized by the staff of the Marland home for linens to be stored and other various tasks to be accomplished. On the opposite end of the second floor landing, the west end, opposite from Mary Virginia Marland's bedroom, we find E.W. Marland's bedroom suite, which also was adjoined by his own private bath. Again, later on you'll be seeing this room as the setup space for our patriarchal American Indian items. In the center of the second floor landing, our hanging stairway extends all the way up to the third floor. Currently, the third floor is not open for visitation because it's part attic and part storage. But originally, the third floor housed two maids, probably housemaids' bedrooms with a bathroom adjoining in between.
Hello, my name is Chris Littlecook, and I'm here to welcome you to the second floor of Marland's grand home. The home is housed to a fine collection of Native American artifacts and items that rivals any museum anywhere in the United States. It's divided into 3 rooms that we're going to cover this morning. It's divided into the basket room, which contains baskets from different parts of the United States, the matriarchal room, which contains items and artifacts specific to Native American females and children, and this room in which we're standing, the patriarchal room, which contains items specific to Native American males or warriors. And it contains items and artifacts that they may have used in everyday life, as well as ceremonial uses. This is a portrait of White Eagle, chief of the Ponca tribe, or head chief of the Ponca tribe during their time of removal to the Oklahoma Territory. He was very instrumental in the transition from the Ponca tribe to the way of life that they had to adjust to here in Oklahoma Territory. He never spoke English, he always spoke through an interpreter. He knew the importance of adjusting to the new life in Oklahoma, and he encouraged his tribe to do all they could to gather all the information that they needed to be successful in this new area they lived in now. This case contains items specific to the Ponca tribe's Haloshka Society, which is a men's warrior society that's existed for decades and centuries, actually going back, way back in time. It was a society of men who did things for the tribe to ensure the success, whether it be defending the tribe from enemies or doing what was necessary to take care of elders and orphans, and also to give away items to people in need. The headgear on top is called a roach. It's made from porcupine quills and deer hair, and it was worn during these ceremonial dances when they would gather and give away items and take care of things that need to be taken care of. Next to that is an otter turban made out of otter hide. It was worn on the head, usually reserved for the more important warriors or say a chief's son. On the second shelf or middle shelf is an eagle fan or eagle wing fan. It symbolized strength because it's the wing of the eagle that propelled it high into the air. It was believed that the eagle was a messenger between heaven and earth because it flew so high. And that was one of the reasons why it was revered so much by not only the Poncas, but Native American tribes across the United States. This case contains items that were given to E.W. Marland from the Ponca tribe, a ceremonial drum or a drum that commemorates the event, as well as a bonnet. They made him an honorary member of the tribe. They benefited from each other's relationship because it was on Ponca land that Marland discovered his first oil well that was profitable, the Willie Cries. The Poncas owned the land all around Ponca City at one time. Before Ponca City was even established, the Ponca tribe moved here in 1877, 1878 time. This is a new part of the exhibit in this room. It's a touch and feel exhibit. It contains items like furs and bones and different parts of the animal that Native Americans would have utilized back in the day to make their clothing, make their shelter, also playthings and utensils for eating and drinking. The public is welcome to touch and feel these items and pick them up and just get an idea of what the Native Americans had to work with, to make things that they needed for their everyday life. It wasn't like now we could go to the store and purchase these things. They had to make them from hand from the articles that were available to them, which were the animals that were in this area: buffalo, deer, antelope, things of that nature. This case contains pipes of different sizes and shapes. The pipe was very instrumental in Native American man's life as it was a social bonding event. Much like if you visited somebody and they offered you a cup of coffee, it was customary to offer your guest a smoke in their pipe. These were used for every day, just like I said, for socializing. And also there was protocol involved. The pipe stem and the pipe bowl were not connected till they were actually ready to be used and smoked. Also, when a host was ready for the guest to be on their way, they would disconnect the pipe and start cleaning the bowl. And that was an outward sign for the guest that it was time for them to leave. Also in this case, there's a sample of 2 different tobacco bags. You can look and see that there's beadwork and also quill work. The older style bags had quill work, which was a flattened pine needle and wrapped around and dyed. It was before they had availability of beads. And so these are samples that are really old. If there's a quill work on it, then that means it's a very old bag. There are several paintings in this room as well, and this is a portrait of White Eagle that was owned by E.W. Marland. White Eagle and E.W. Marland had a relationship that was beneficial to both of them. This is the basket and pottery room. It's the Fred Bartram collection Fred was an accountant for the Marland Oil Company at one time, and before that, he was a teacher on reservations, specifically in the Northwest region, Southwest region, and also the North Central, which is Montana, Washington State, and Arizona. And during his time, he collected these baskets and pottery from those different areas. It's a very fine collection. Some of the pottery is made out of ceramics from the Southwest, and it looks like the Northwest was mostly organic items such as pine needles and things of that nature. Some of these items are so finely woven they could hold water. There's also a collection of kachina dolls from the Southwest. Kachinas were little gods, different entities or deities for different tribes like the Navajo and the Hopi. It's a fine collection and a lot of artifacts in this room that you can't really find in anywhere else, or if you can, the quality rivals that. We're now in the matriarchal room of the collection of Native American artifacts here at the Marland's Grand Home. It contains everything that a woman would need, from dresses to moccasins to all the accessories, also the way they made the things, and also contains children's items as well, dolls and games. Some of these items were also collected by Fred Bartram, as well as the baskets we saw in the other room. What we're looking at now is some of the pouches that the women may have carried, because back in the day you really didn't have pockets to carry items they needed. So bags were popular not only with women but men as well, and there's a lot of examples in this case of different styles of pouches. This is also a new portion or a new exhibit in this room. It contains items that the women would have used to work with to make dresses and clothing. Originally, as we saw before, the dresses were buckskin, but as wool cloth or trade cloth became available and material, they kind of went to that. And also in the case, it contains the items they would have used to decorate and also embellish the dresses and shirts and different clothing they would have made from the new materials available to them. This case contains dolls and samples from all across the United States and Alaska. While it seems like they're just playthings, it's very important in a Native American child's life to have these toys. Because long ago, they didn't have formal schooling or a brick and mortar school where they could go and learn things. So they were taught practically by playing with dolls to how to care for children, how to take care of things. And the boys would also learn from toy bow and arrows how to hunt. So it's a kind of a small scale of what they would be doing as adults. And these are fine samples of children's dolls and playthings from all over. This case contains 3 buckskin dresses as well as the accessories that go along with it. If you'll notice, the middle dress has a lot of beadwork on the yoke. This is typical of a northern style buckskin dress. The southern style buckskin dress are the other 2 that are on its side of it. Not as much beadwork, still beadwork, but not as much as the northern style. Both of them are very beautiful, handmade, specifically tailored for the woman who wore these dresses. This is a portrait of Lily Burkhart, a member of the Osage tribe. She was very important in her tribe and represented not only her tribe, but a lot of Native Americans in Washington, D.C. during her lifetime. A large number of items in this room, the matriarchal room, were donated to the museum by her and her estate. This closet contains samples of cradle boards, Osage cradle boards, also an Osage wedding dress, which was a military uniform that was embellished, as you can see. Very beautiful, very bright, very colorful. Also contains samples of Native American Ponca women style of dress as well.
Hello, my name is Joe Glazer. I'm Secretary Treasurer of the 101 Ranch Old Timers Association, and I'm here to give you a little view of our museum downstairs. So come on down, let's see what's going on. You're in the west room of the museum now. This is primarily belongs to the 101 Ranch Old Timers Association. This particular museum is owned by three different groups: the Old Timers, the City, and the 101 Ranch Collectors Association. It's been in here for quite a few years, has quite a few items that came off the 101 Ranch. A lot of them are one of a kind. Part of them, the items belong to 101 Ranch Wild West performers that were with the show and worked on the 101 Ranch. I'll show you some of the individual items here in a little bit, but to give you a little bit of history on the 101 Ranch, it started back in the 1870s. George W. Miller was a plantation owner in Crab Orchard, Kentucky prior to the Civil War. As you all know, the Civil War was won by the North and he was on the South. Very disgruntled and decided he was going to head west as far as he could go. California was his goal. He got as far as Newtonia, Missouri, and it was too late in the year to proceed on by covered wagon, so he stayed through the winter. Got acquainted with a lot of the cattlemen that drove herds up to Newtonia to sell from Texas, and finally decided that this is the country where he was going to make his stand, and went to Texas, bought longhorns, brought them up, leased land off the Quapaws in the eastern part of Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma, and started his ranch. He later moved to Baxter Springs to be closer to his enterprise and got acquainted with the Chief White Eagle and the Ponca Indians, who were there waiting for the government to find them a place to live down in Indian Territory. They eventually located at the present site of White Eagle, and Joe, the oldest son of GW, made the run in 1893, staked a claim down here about 9 miles southwest of Ponca City, and that's the official start of the 101 Ranch. They proceeded on to increase their acreage, eventually having 110,000 acres. In the early part of it, cattle went, prices went down on it, and they knew they had to do something different, so they diversified into agriculture. And everything they did was in a large way. The ranch flourished. Eventually it was almost a self-sufficient little town. They had about 300 to 600 employees at any given time at the ranch, and most of them lived there on the ranch. And this went on through the 20s. They had a Wild West show that went throughout the world. Everything was fine until Joe died in 1926. Then George died in 1929, and the bank failure, and the ranch just went downhill, and pretty much was over in the late 1930s. This museum here we have to keep the history and the life of the 101 Ranch alive, and I hope you enjoy what we see down here. Before we proceed on, I want to tell you a little bit about this display here. It's a miniature of one of the 101 Ranch shows. It was done by a circus group out in Oregon about 15 years ago. Each year they would get together and recreate a circus show or what have you. Anyway, that particular year they decided they was going to do the 101 Ranch. It took them a year to create it. It's done in sections that slide into a shipping crate that where you can haul it around. Anyway, the secretary of the group called us and wanted to know if we would be interested in having it. And of course we was excited about that and wanted to know how much it would cost. They said if we paid the gas to get it to Missouri, we could have it. Well, they took it to Missouri, had one last big show of it, and then they brought it to Ponca City, and we've had it ever since. And it's a good representation of what the circus or the Wild West shows were back in those days.
We've made our way down to the basement where the original swimming pool was. And in this cubby, actually there are 4 of these where guests could change into their swimming garments before jumping into the pool. This room also housed a little bathroom for the guests to use and certainly had a concrete floor because of all the water that might be tracked in. Today we have our Native American archaeology exhibit here, which features many different items, mostly of stone, used by the natives for tools of all sorts. Over here, in this case, with the large painting above, is an exhibit which features items that were unearthed from an archaeology excavation funded by E.W. Marland in 1926. There was a Wichita encampment along the Arkansas River about 10 miles north of Ponca City, where the French would sail up from New Orleans to trade with the natives for buffalo hides, some deer hides, but mainly buffalo hides and buffalo leathers. E.W. Marland loved to swim, and so he included an indoor, underground basement swimming pool in the Marland Grand Home. This pool was most likely the first ever in Oklahoma and is the most sought after thing to look at, to see at the Marland Grand Home. We've read that it took a team of mules 40 days to dig out the pool. And people wonder, why in the world is the deep end closest to the entrance door? Well, probably that was because those mules had to carry that dirt up and out the slope and then beyond in order to get the hole dug. We've now completed our video tour of the 1916 E.W. Marland Grand Home in Ponca City. We're happy that you joined us and want you to also know about following Marland and Mary Virginia's stay here in this home. E.W. Marland moved to an even larger palace 1 mile north of here. It's probably 3 times the size of this home. Now, unfortunately, 2 years prior to that, Mary Virginia did pass away from some illness that we really, even to this day, don't know what it was. Marland stayed here 2 more years with Lydia and George. While Lydia and George were actually at school back east. And then, as I said, moved on over to that larger, what we call today the Marland Mansion. So if you get a chance, make sure you try to see it as well. They're open for tours daily, as we are. Thanks for being here.